Hey everybody, Nikki again, here to do another video. That's my personal experience, not to be used as medical advice. Okay, not to be used as medical advice, I should say that very clearly. Please not to be used as medical advice. All right, I'm doing this one because I got off the phone with Medtronic just now. It's an hour-long call, a very nice call, a very pleasant call. I've had a lot of those lately. And a couple things that maybe can be of some help or of some use to somebody out there. First thing first, when I spoke with the very first person who answered the phone, I explained that I had called a couple times and had, without being rude, had basically wasted an hour on the phone with somebody who was just reading from a manual for me. And I said, I would really like somebody who knows something about the 670G and something about auto mode. And he said, okay, well, let me transfer you to a pump technician. So that was very nice. So I did go right in with somebody who was not answering from the manual. So maybe that is something to keep in mind, that the next time you call Medtronic, you ask for a pump technician. I think all it means is that they've been trained on the 670G, but what that also means is that you're not going to get somebody who hasn't been. And they did say that very clearly, that not all representatives have been. Some of them are just trained on the sensors. Yet they answer questions too, so you might not know who you've gotten. Okay, so that was number one. So once I was transferred to the pump technician, I was asking her very specifically about settings changes, about the ICR settings change and the AIT, the insulin carb ratio and the active insulin time. A couple things have come up lately, and a few people have really been trying to explain to me why these two settings are an absolute necessity in order to get auto mode to be more aggressive. And of course, my concern is with changing them, you're also getting more insulin during a food bolus or a correction bolus. And if I know I don't need that in manual mode, then how am I not setting myself up for kind of a surprise hypoglycemic event in auto mode, because I never know what auto mode is going to deliver to me. So I do have a lot of concern about those settings, and I really am taking some time and calling Medtronic and trying to gather the information before I change them. About ICR, I'll start with that one. Today I had a conversation with somebody, and this isn't I'm not trying to call anybody out. I would just like to say I had a very nice conversation with somebody, and a very interesting conversation with somebody, and she made a good case for it about how ICR really is like a dial, and that even when you're not eating, to adjust your ICR is how you make bigger microboluses. I spoke with Medtronic. I actually read some of the message, and I just said, this is what she's saying, and is this true? Because I feel like Medtronic should be able to answer a yes, that is how it works, or no, it's not how it works. And her answer was, no, it's not how it works. She said, you're not going to get bigger micros for your ICR. She says, it's not a dial. That's not what it is. And it's just not how it works. She said, in fact, there is nothing. This is in line with what I got the last call. There is nothing you can do to increase the size of your microbolus. And she said, also AIT included. She said, and the AIT argument is a slightly different one, but also a very good argument, but she said it's just not how it works. It is not a dial. She said, auto mode is taking into consideration your data, your SG value, and your history and your trend. And she said that's what it's taking into, and also your insulin sensitivity factor, which was interesting because she didn't say it was something that you could, it wasn't a setting you could change, but it's something that auto mode was calculating maybe, or, taking into consideration. That's it. She said you can't make your microboluses any bigger by a settings change. So the thing that I told her, I said I had a lot of problems with that my last time around, that my microboluses just weren't good enough to stop those highs. And she said, yes, the thing that we think might be the biggest problem is the sensor lag. And this was absolutely true for me. She said, unfortunately, because when you have a rapidly changing blood sugar, it takes a while for the sensor to understand what's going on. It just starts you off with these kind of slower, smaller micros. And sometimes by the time you really get ramped up, you've already left or you've already done a correction, and then it kicks you back into that minimum delivery again. So she said, the lag is really a big part of the problem. And I do think that was true. And she said, sure, you can try changing ICR and AIT. And she said, the auto is really taking into consideration lots of information, but just those settings alone isn't going to get you a bigger micro. She said it does take about a month worth of data. That is about how far back it can look. It's about a month that it can kind of track and make decisions. It does gather your information every single day. And if you're going to make some kind of a change, she said, really try to give it 6 days, because that sounds fair enough. That 6 days, assuming that you're a human being and not every single day is the same, it can kind of gather, your new behavior or whatever over 6 days. That's not how she said it. That's how I just messed it up. But that's basically, if you change something, give it 6 days. She said microboluses are determined by a number of things. No, not to just ICR setting or as a determining factor, and no to AIT. If you mess with it, mess with it. But that the concern is that when you do, you're changing things more globally. You're not just affecting a microbolus size, you're also affecting your bolus size. So they do really recommend that you do that with a doctor, and it's out of necessity and not just to increase micros. AIT, the argument was fantastic. So fantastic that I decided I would try an AIT change. I'm not going to do it tonight, but probably in 2 nights I'll go ahead and try one. And basically it was that it doesn't really work the way you think about it in manual mode, and it has to do with, you have to let Auto know that it's okay to do a little insulin stacking for the micros. That's a really bad summary of it, but that's it in a nutshell. And declined, she's gonna kill me. And that makes some sense, right? So like maybe it's gonna give me some smaller micros because it's gathering everything that it's allowed, that I'm limiting it to. She said, nope. She said, it's still not like that. It's not a dial. You can't just turn up your micros. And again, it's taking all those things into consideration. But with that being said, here's the way I see it. If it can influence my micro size, and if that has nothing to do with the fact that I've bolused during a certain time period. So for instance, if I change my AIT and I really decrease it, I lower it, and then I have to do a couple of corrections, then yes, I will get more insulin because I'm adding extra insulin to each correction. But if it just influences the microbolus size, like if it unlocks bigger micros, then I should be able to see those micros even during periods I'm not doing corrections. And for ICR, even during periods I'm not eating anything. And that's supposedly what people say, is that it can change your micros even when you're not eating anything. So I don't eat anything, I'd say past, midnight, but that's sometimes true, sometimes not. I definitely don't eat anything past 1 o'clock in the morning. And I definitely don't eat anything before 6 o'clock in the morning. So from 1 to 6, I'm going to change my ICR, and I'm going to just see. I have all my micros written down. I know what they are, and I'll be able to tell whether or not I'm getting an increase. And I have to leave it for 6 days, and then I will do the same thing for the AIT. I'll probably do AIT first, and I'll leave it for 6 days, and I'll see. And it will be enough evidence for me, one way or another, because it will be. So those are the 2 settings changes. Don't know if it makes any difference to anybody. I asked about the CareLink update because I was also told that it was going to include specific micro bolus values. And today they said no, it doesn't. It just shades in that it's active, but it doesn't give you any kind of totals, no hourly totals, and no specific values. And then I asked about the Guardian Connect. If you haven't heard about it, it's supposed to be for MDI. It does not connect with the pump, but it links to a phone. And pumpers can use it, but you have to wear 2 different sensors, and it requires 2 different transmitters. And of course, I wanted to know, did it have a visible iSig? And they said no. So that's what I got from the call. Don't know if it helps anybody, but I'm putting it all away and I'm going to bed. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good night. Bye.